Big news this week. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Respawn developer, had been somewhat silent on the game. Hadn't been any updates for quite some time, but we got a massive update this week. And it looks as though the console versions of the game and the PC version have received updates. And the big news, I guess, is that the 60 FPS performance mode on the consoles is now actually running, I believe, at 60 frames per second. Now, Oliver, you took a look at Jedi Survivor back in the day, and you have dipped your toes in to take a look at this new revamped performance mode. I'm curious what you think about it.
I have. So it's basically as advertised, as they say, which is that they've stripped out the ray tracing features from the game entirely in the performance mode on Series X and PS5, which means no more RT reflections or RTGI. So in practice, a lot of the subtler lighting detail that you see in the game, it's been completely stripped out, like in the more complex areas of geometry and around like neon lights and things like that. You no longer get that kind of rich lighting treatment that you had before. The lighting that remains still looks good, but it's not quite up to the same standard. Likewise for the RT reflections, which are a more obvious cutback, I would say. Like now you have SSR in their place without really a good cube map fallback, so surfaces often look quite matte when you include the SSR information. But the trade-off, I guess, ultimately is that you get a game that runs quite consistently at 60 FPS, at least in my testing so far in Series X. Before it ran usually 40 to 60 FPS, I would say, in that range, with tearing in the top third of the screen. Now it's almost always 60, even in the most demanding areas of the opening mission. It's like 60 with a handful of drops over, the course of hours. So It's much better there. And there are one or two more quirks, like the cutscenes still run at 30 FPS with high resolution support, but you don't get ray tracing features in those cutscenes anymore, which I presume, they just don't want to switch to a ray tracing mode in real time. Before, those cutscenes ran at 30 FPS with ray tracing features and higher resolution in the performance mode. So yeah, that's basically my impression.
That's pretty to the point, isn't it? Do you think they should have removed the prior 60 FPS mode completely, or should it have remained as an option? I'm curious what you think about that.
I don't think it was very worthwhile. And honestly, the cutbacks they've made here completely make sense, and they don't affect the presentation of the game a huge amount, because the big J already looked pretty good. The reflections are not a huge part of the game's visual aesthetic in most areas. So I actually think it looks quite good. It still looks like it's still one of the best looking console games, in my opinion, on the market. Even in the performance mode, it still looks quite good.
John, did you actually play Jedi Survivor? I know it was on your to-do list.
I've played it on PS5, and I actually did test the new patch as well. And the PS5 experience matches what Oliver is saying here. The only thing I will say is that I actually think that the reflection change is more serious than you were suggesting. Not in all areas of the game, mind you, but I think it was on Kobo, where there's a lot of water, or there's areas with like bodies of water, but then also lots of foliage. And I found that the appearance, the occlusion and disocclusion of the SSR from the foliage is extremely distracting. It honestly looks broken to a degree, because it just breaks what SSR can do. And in those cases, I would have much preferred to say a somewhat approximate cube map versus SSR.
Yeah.
But I suppose they would have had to do more work to set that up for that area.
The appearance of it almost reminded me a little bit of, Resident Evil 2 in that early PlayStation area.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where you get that awful SSR.
Jesus.
Because there's no fallback, or no good fallback, in this case, no cube map. And in for instance, at the end of the first level, I'll show some footage on screen here. At the end of the first level, you're kind of fighting a bunch of stormtroopers and such in a big aircraft hangar. And the floor is a completely reflective, glossy surface. And you just see all those SSR occlusion artifacts all over the screen, on the player character, on enemy characters. It really looks horrible. And there's just kind of like this blank, like whitish outlines around the characters. It really does not look good at all. So I think in a lot of instances, it would be preferable if they had just reverted to a cube map and eschewed SSR entirely.
Yeah, and I suspect that given that the original target platforms for this, many of these areas were arted specifically knowing that they had ray tracing features enabled, right? But then I'd imagine then it was announced that, we need to bring this to last generation consoles too, which means they had to find a fallback solution. And, SSR is probably the simplest one to implement in terms of existing engine features without having to craft like, custom cube map setups and such. So yeah, it's a weird one. It really reinforced my dislike for SSR when used across bodies of water specifically, or large flat surfaces. I just don't think it works. We've had better solutions, some more expensive, like planar reflections, of course, which probably would not be viable from a performance standpoint, but just cube maps definitely would have been an improvement here. Possibly nothing, if you just do something with the water surface. And I don't know, I almost would prefer no reflections over SSR. An SSR toggle would be nice, because it is honestly that bad. And SSR in general doesn't usually work well in third-person games to begin with, and this has a lot of stuff going on around on the camera, so that's unfortunate. Beyond that, though, there's the PC version, which anecdotally only, I've spoken with some friends that were playing it again, and they are still having issues on their PCs. It does seem that, the frame generation stuff is nice, but you're still not getting a stutter-free experience, which is a bummer. I brought that word back from last week. And you know what? I'm not confident that they will ever fix that, because if you go back to the prior game on PC, the same exact problem still exists there. Shader compilation stutter is just a part of that game, and it has never been fixed. So I think we can probably give up hope on this being fixed, especially given that the patch notes do not mention that work is continuing to be done, right? If you notice that. Prior patches would say like, oh yeah, and we're continuing to work on these issues. This one was like, just, that's it. So this might be the final patch. Though, given that it's coming to last-gen consoles, I guess there is still hope that they might further optimize certain elements and, bring that forward. Who knows? But still, this is closer on consoles. This is how it probably should have shipped in the first place. And I'm surprised that they were so insistent on keeping ray tracing features active in their performance mode when it was clear that they obviously could not hit 60 at all.
Yeah.
So
it's especially curious because on Series S, they actually did not have ray tracing enabled in that version of the game.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Right. So they had like all this this whole rendering, this whole rasterized rendering pipeline was built into the game and looking okay, at least on Series S, and obviously on PCs that, don't support those higher end features. This was a pathway that they could have taken back at launch. And judging from the progression of the various patches they've had 7 major patches and a couple half-step patches. I actually don't think they had improved performance significantly before this patch in the performance mode. Like, it was basically the same as it was at launch when I covered it, at least judging from my own experience. So yeah, this does seem like the only real improvement that they've made since launch, and it seems like something that's so obvious, right?
Well, I had not ever played this game on Series S, actually, and I forgot about that there is no ray tracing there. So they've had a fallback option this entire time.
Yeah.
From the beginning. And remind me, Oliver, is the Series S version capped at 30 frames per second, or was there
capped
also
at 30.
A performance mode? And so it's just straight 30. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at this question from CGG867. 7th patch for Star Wars Jedi Survivor released this week. Along with finally adding DLSS on PC, it also provides a quote-unquote solid 60 FPS in performance mode on consoles. Seems clear this game released in an unfinished and unoptimized state, as we've seen with many AAA releases this gen. Should titles like these be launching with an early access label, or should players just expect 4+ months of patches for games to be completed now? I don't think they would have internally considered it to be an early access version when they launched it. But it is clear that the game needed more time. Yeah. I think that, and it's not the first game that does that. So
the 30 FPS mode was always pretty decent, actually. Accepting some pretty nasty and progress affecting bugs that some players noticed, which were not really acceptable. But the 30 FPS mode had some drops in prior versions. I have not tested the most recent patch, but it was a pretty decent 30 FPS experience. So it was not quite an early access state, I would say.
But it was not acceptable on PC, like, at all.
Oh no, not completely not acceptable.
The PC launch version was it's horrendous. It's going to be up there on our worst PC ports of 2023 list for sure, which I'm trying to encourage Alex to make happen. I think we need the PC Hall of Shame for DF here.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Right?
I mean, the last couple of years have been grim for PC.
2023 especially, though, has been bad. I think, Rich, you're still scarred from testing Wild Hearts.
I'm not angry, John. I'm disappointed.
Oh, see, that's worse, actually.
It is.
You disappoint Richard Ledbetter.
But yeah, basically, I'm not at all comfortable with the concept that the PC audience is being treated like a second-class citizen, which is definitely what's happening with Jedi Survivor, which is just profoundly disappointing. There've been so many games. It's to the point now where a good PC port comes along, it's like happy days. It's like something we just didn't expect.
Like Armored Core 6.
I was just watching the clip of your Armored Core 6 impressions. It's like, hey, this is a really good PC port. It should be the same. It should be like that on every game that comes out. But it's the exception rather than the norm, which is really, really shocking. But here we are. Ah, dear. Yeah, Jedi Survivor. I mean, I think Oliver is going to be working on a full video for that. So stay tuned. Whether Alex can face his inner demons and return to that game for the PC version in the knowledge that maybe it still has fundamental problems is another thing. Maybe we'll discuss it in a direct in future. We'll have to just wait and see.